Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We have a special episode today. We're interviewing Exmo Joe, and he wrote a book, and we're going to talk about the book. We interviewed him a little while back where we got his story up until the time he was excommunicated. And there he's showing the book, the Korihor Argument. And Carrie Schertz is on with me to co-host, and we'll run it on both of our shows. And welcome, Carrie and Joe.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here. I thought you were getting ready to say yes, and we're running on fumes.
We are running on fumes. Carrie and I are running on fumes.
Hey, it's good to meet you back here, Professor. Been a fan for a long time.
Well, it's great to meet you, Exmo Joe, named after your grandfather.
That's yes, right. Thank you. Not after Joseph Smith. Mom.
Hey, your mother meant well, all right?
Yes, she did. I mean, she meant to be irritating, but she meant it in the best and most loving possible way.
That's right. So
that way. That's why we need to pay more attention to our heavenly mom, because she has that same attitude. So that's why I do the heavenly mom spiel so much. In fact, I'm doing mine tomorrow night on live. So come and watch it.
I'm really looking forward to. Now I'm already derailing it, Gene. I'm really looking forward to hearing. I mentioned this in comments of the show you were on. I think here on Daily Digest. You're talking about reviewing Marker Barker's work.
Yes, I'm doing that. Tomorrow night is my second install of that series. Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I know that I've been in contact with a person who recommends her a lot. I'm sure you probably have heard of Dr. Bob Price. I have one of his books back here.
And now you've been in contact with two of us who recommend her stuff.
Oh, great.
I've only got two books of hers that I haven't bought and read, but I've read all her other stuff. So, and she is absolute gold.
Yeah, that's right. So Joe, lead us to the story of how you came to be excommunicated.
Yeah, what's going on here? You seem like a pretty normal, decent sort of ex-Mormon Joe to me.
Even though you look like a grown-up Nemo the Mormon.
You look like an early Mormon apostle.
Oh, hey, there we go. Jeez, man. The backhanded compliments are getting more and more subtle, Carrie.
I guess you can. I'm like your mother. I meant that well.
We'll have to tell that part of the story now. So basically I became an atheist while I was a missionary in Peru. Which I can tell you is a hard thing for a Mormon boy to 20 years old to endure. I had always had those doubts, and we talked a little bit about that. Going back to when I was a kid, the Ted Bundy story. Did I tell the Ted Bundy story? People probably getting sick of that story. Anyways, I know I am. But then probably my oldest doubt, though, was the debate between Alma and Korihor, and just going through it and going, this story just breaks down as it goes along. And I thought, I could write a whole paper. I remember this when I was a missionary back in 2001. I'm like, I could write a whole paper just about how, Alma loses this debate. He very clearly loses this debate. And what spiritual...
Alma lost?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad I could teach you something back there, Professor.
This would be fun.
It's only because Alma had the stupefy curse,
right?
That he won. It's not on logic, though.
Well, this is going to be interesting.
I mean, effectively, you think about it, really, the Nephite hegemony had to shut him up. That's really what it came down to. It was, you make too much dang sense, you have to be shut up now. And then you're going to be murdered by Zoramites.
Well, I'll bet the Mormon leaders today wish they had that priesthood power.
Right? I was on Mormon News Roundup the other night, and we were talking about that, and Divas was telling me, I technically still have the priesthood. I said, strike me dumb. Let's hear it. Let's go. Yeah. The church excommunicated to me and it didn't work.
Hey, be careful, because Gene has the power to shut your mic off. He can strike you dumb.
That's true. Gene, just be cool, man. Just be cool.
Be cool, Gene. We want to hear this.
So, So I came home from my mission. I was a closet atheist. I didn't want to tell anybody that I've lost, faith in God, because that is amoral. That makes you a bad person, right? But good people are people who believe things on bad evidence. Everybody knows that. And eventually got married, settled down with a Mormon girl. I told her, and we talked a little bit about this, Gene, last time, that, I had told her, she's like, "You're a returned missionary?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm an atheist." But, and she's like, "I don't care. You're a returned missionary. My parents are going to be thrilled." And, and we settled down, had
testimony.
Right. And, even the broken testimony is a testimony. I met her parents. Molly and I had been dating for about a week. She had moved in with me at that point. And they were just devastated, of course, because we get to go do that walk of shame, like tell her parents, like, so Molly's not been living with my sister, the Relief Society president of the singles ward. She's living with me. So
I heard that story on the Secret Lives of Ex-Mormon Wives a few weeks ago.
I forgot Molly was on that one. Yeah, that's good. No, but then her mother started bawling her eyes out, right? And then this is in Mesa, Arizona. Good people, my in-laws, by the way. I just want to preface this. And then both and her father just kind of scowling at me. And then gave me a lecture about you kids these days that can't control your bodies and how ashamed you must feel, and that you're not in control of yourselves, and blah, blah, blah. And my now mother-in-law says to me, "Are you even a member of the church?" And I had said, "Well, I am technically a member of the church." And she's like, "What is that supposed to mean?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, I'm kind of a Jack Mormon, I guess, but I don't really believe in God, so I don't want to mislead you guys. I mean, because that was the point where I told them, I love your daughter, and I think I'm going to marry her, which I did, 2 months to the day after I met her. And so she says to me, were you even a good member of the church when you were active? And I told her, well, I went on a mission. And both of them, shing, big smiles, brightness filling the room, the Holy Spirit.
Hope.
I'm like, I'm an atheist returned missionary, and they're like, "That's fine, that's fine." But they're like, "You don't understand. We've been praying for so long that one day Molly would marry a returned missionary." And I was like, "Did anybody care about the 'I don't believe in God' thing? Shall I just stop? I'll just stop, I guess." Okay, fine, cool. I'm into it.
Looks more important than the philosophy of Joe.
It really is. It's like there was a quality to it. There was like the shine.
Are you still married to her?
I am. Yeah, 19
How long
years.
have you guys been married?
19 years. We got 3 kids. Our oldest is turning 18 this December, which is the craziest.
And you get along good with your in-laws.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to them, they're still in Arizona. I'm in Utah. I mean, who could have foreseen that?
Still haven't gotten to how you got excommunicated.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that was down the road. But basically what it came down to was so we had babies, moved around. I started my career as a video producer and failed filmmaker, full-time failed filmmaker for 30 years now. And we eventually needed to find new business contracts. And so we came to Utah. Here in Utah, we met with all kinds of cool ex-Mormons. Molly got active in the church while I was getting more and more active in the ex-Mormon community, believe it or not. I almost didn't have contacts in the ex-Mormon community when I lived in Mesa, or Gilbert or Chandler. But when I came to American Fork, oh man, all of a sudden ex-Mormons everywhere. And I'm involved in doing the calm meetings and things. And I'm like, man, ex-Mormons in Utah are the best. And so we started really getting connected with people out here. And meanwhile, Molly was going through a spiritual crisis, and she returned to church. Okay, sure. So she got active again, and she went through the temple for the first time. We took out her endowments by herself, which was a difficult thing for her. You know, you have your returned missionary husband and can't even learn your top secret Jesus name. And so, but then she comes out of the temple, and after that, how shall I put this? I told you before, Gene, that Molly and I have that we are practicing ethical non-monogamous, shall we say, now that we are polyamorous. Yeah. I got you with that one back here, Professor. Like, there's so many syllables in that one very simple thing. But yeah.
Way over my head.
Well, the church does not
almost
shine
like
well.
soft Mormonism. Soft early Mormonism.
Yeah. There's a lot of jokes
Patriarchy
that
is not
made.
involved in it.
There's a lot of right. This is that's right. That's the non-patriarchal polygamy. It really isn't anything like polygamy. but suffice it to say, our bedroom activities were not approved by the church. Living in true Korihor style, he caused many women and also many men to commit whoredoms. This one right here, and as a result, her bishop, she went in and told the bishop that she
confessed, because some of your sins might wash off on her.
Yeah, bring him into the bedroom.
Confess for you.
Right. And then the bishop ends up taking her temple recommend away, which was devastating for her. Yeah. And I told her, I said, you know what you should do? Go in. You should go into your follow-up appointment and ask him to give you your recommend back. And she's like, Joe, he's serious. This is really bad. And I said, tell him that your husband is a pervert and that you do things to keep your family together, to keep your marriage together. And she's like, what? I'm like, I'm telling you, try it. That's exactly what she did. And he gave her back a recommend.
Right. It's not her fault. It's her husband's fault.
All you folks out there in the interfaith marriages, just take it on the chin. Anybody had said, I want to meet your husband, though, because I want him to look me in the eye and say it to my face. And because what he's done is committed spiritual murder. And so, so I went in and I said, sure, I'm in. So I go in and I confront my wife's bishop, and he tells me, he calls in, he was shocked that I showed up to this appointment. But then he goes out and he calls in the whole bishopric. He's like, you gotta come in and see this. He got the ward clerk in there. Okay.
Remember that guy I've been telling you about? He's actually here. He showed.
Right. Let's all get our ecclesiastical confidence here.
That's right. And everybody start brushing up on your bishop's manuals. Right?
That's right.
So
he comes in.
The guidebooks.
Yeah, the priesthood leadership manual.
The leadership manual.
Get it right. But then so they come in, and I'm like, cool. I mean, what do I got? Too much pride? I looked around to them, and each one I said, I'm Joe Rawlins, and I'm a pervert. I make my wife do freaky things. What do you want me to say? I do it.
Yeah, like, what do you want to know? What details you want to know?
That's right. I do it, and I love it. You want to know about the time I was 14 and thought I was going to become the next Ted Bundy? I had to tell my bishop what happened with the Mervyn's catalog. No, okay, all right. But anyway, so and they're like, well, and the bishop says to me, what do you think that God thinks about this? I said, I'm not much interested. And he said, well, do you even believe in God? And that was the first time I told a priesthood leader that, no, I don't believe in God. I haven't believed in God in a long time. And he's like, well, you can't be a Mormon and not believe in God. I was like, right? So I said, but, But
I am one.
And yet, lo and behold, here I am. And long story short, he gave me this is a Satanist miracle. But then he tells me, he says, so basically, here's an ultimatum: you are going to resign your membership from the church today, or I'm going to submit you to the stake for excommunication.
Now, had you heard that that you could resign your membership ever before in your life?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
But I told them, my parents attended that ward too. And I told him, I said, it would break my mother's heart if I left the church. So, I mean, even if it's
on your
just
own.
the appearance of it. Right.
Your
I'm
mom knows you're a pervert anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. She
She was
know
there from the beginning.
I told my wife, I said, I do have to give my mother credit, this much credit, as strict a Mormon woman as she was growing up. She did know to come into my bedroom where my brother and I had shared a bedroom and just not look at either of us and said, and just staring away, looking away, said, I'm not looking at anyone. I'm very upset and I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. But I do need to know if the Cross Your Heart bras are on sale at Mervin's, and somebody in this room knows. I just of course, I have to turn to my brother and go, Kevin. And he's like, oh, shut up. Like they don't know it's you.
It was the Sears catalog for my brother.
Oh, really? Oh, man. That's why he loves power tools. Right. Softcore pornography. Well, of course. You know the story. Well, we won't tell the Ted Bundy story again, but yeah, Ted Bundy. Let's not. Yeah. So, So my
plus, if you resign, that's you taking the initiative to do that. If they excommunicate you, it's a court of love, and they're hoping that you'll repent someday and come back.
In the words of the Book of Mormon, it's a question of being something that acts rather than something that is acted upon, right? So it's like there's a question: am I acting or am I being acted upon? And so I said, look, this is what I'm going to tell you. I do consider myself an ex-Mormon, and we practically invented resigning from the church. I mean, we had to force your church to acknowledge that there is such a thing as a right to resign from the church. And that's our instrument, not yours. And you don't get to tell me that I have to quit the church. I have to resign the church.
That's right. QuitMormon.com.
Right. And I said, well, that didn't exist back then, I don't think. But he said to me, well, I'll submit. He said, the only thing left then is for me to submit you to the stake president to begin the process of setting up a court of love. And I said, yeah, let's do that. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I think that'd be good. And I was actually kind of excited about it. And I'll tell you why. There was a video, and I'm going to get this wrong. I'm pretty sure there was a video when I grew up. I want to say it was called The Voice from the Dust or something like that. It was a church produced video, and it had the story of Vincenzo di Francesca, I believe the man's name was. And again, I'm butchering this. But anyways, when I grew up, that was like my favorite video from the church. It was about a man who was a preacher in Italy, and he finds the Book of Mormon, and it's covered in soot, so he can't read the cover of it. So he takes it home and he cleans all the pages, but he just knows that it's true and everything. Eventually, the leaders of his church confront him and say, what is this book you've been preaching out of at the pulpit? In this church, we preach from the Bible. And he says, no, I won't. I love this book. I know that it testifies of Christ. I wish you would read the book, and so forth. And eventually they say, our conclusion is that you must burn this book. And rather than burn the book, he suffers expulsion from their order. And I was like, man, what an Abinadi moment. And I thought, man, if I belonged to a church that I didn't believe in, not this church, but if I belonged to a church I didn't believe in, I would hope I could face them and bear the judgment and go and stand up for what I believe in. That would be the way to go, man. And so all my life, I thought, if I ever leave this church, that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to stand up in front of them, just tell them, give them what for. And that's eventually what we did. I met with my stake president.
That's what the universe gave you. That's what you wished. The universe obliged.
Hey, there you go. It manifested it. It was good though. And at the end of the day, look, I know that like a lot of people who, I know Jeremy Reynolds. I mean, it just broke my heart. I was there, not in the room, but I was there the day he was excommunicated. And I just here in Utah, and it just broke my heart to see how it affected him.
You were at the vigil?
Yeah. Yeah, and then there was the, of course, Nemo when he got excommunicated. The year that I was excommunicated, it was like within a year of Kate Kelly and John DeLynn. But of course, nobody knew who I was, so nobody cared. And so around here somewhere, I had briefly published it. What happened is I went into my excommunication and to my court of love, as they called it back then, court of love. And I had my statements prepared on an iPad. And so I pulled out my iPad because you get to speak in your own defense. And so I got out and I gave them what I thought about the church and about why I was leaving. And nobody thought to ask
testimony of why there is no God.
Correct. Well, yeah, basically. Yeah. And why Joseph Smith was a liar. Because here's the thing, the Thursday before, so it was like Sunday, I meet with the stake president, awesome guy, got his signature on a letter around here. Yeah, right over there. And he said, and really nice guy. We see each other at Home Depot sometimes and they're like high five. It's like, hey, a guy kicked me out of the church. What's up? But we're really actually, cool. But he says he says to me, so I think we kick you out of the church. He's like, I really respect this. That he's like, I think that people leaving the church and resigning from the church, I hate it because it's like, they're like sneaking out in the middle of the night. I said, well, I don't feel that way about it at all, but fine. I said, I will tell you this. I feel like this for me is the way that I get closure with the church and the church gets closure with me. He said, I have complete respect for that. Let's do it. Let's kick you out of the church. I said, okay, cool. I said, when? And he said, let's do next Sunday. Okay, what time? Right after the block, 5 o'clock. I was like, okay, let's do it. So we set it up. Then he comes over to my house where I have my office downstairs. I had this basement studio, photo studio at the time. And he came down to my office. He sat down. He said, we have a little problem. I don't have anything to excommunicate you for. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, no.
Oh my!
I was like, I'm like,
well, here, let me do something bad real quick.
Because you're allowed as a Mormon actually to believe anything you want. You just can't say stuff about it.
Well, so it turns out that the priesthood leadership manual is actually kind of stringent as to what are excommunicable offenses. Because I said, okay. what about word of wisdom? I'm like, when I was a kid, I knew people got kicked out of the church for drinking coffee, man. Are you kidding me? And he's like, no, we don't do that anymore. I'm like, really? Oh, I guess that's progressive. Good for you. I'm like, I don't believe in God. He's like, yeah, we can't kick you out for that. I was like, oh. I was like, well, what about apostasy? I mean, isn't that the thing? Everybody gets kicked out for apostasy. And he said, well, you only get kicked out for apostasy if you join another church. And I said, what? Really? And he's like, yeah. And he showed me the priesthood leadership manual. And that's like the third thing. And it's like the first, I think, first thing, as the way I remember it, was teaching doctrine that is contrary to the church's teachings and doctrines, So I'm like, well, I said, look,
so never quote the Bible.
Well, the Bible only testifies of Christ, and that's all that the church does. Carrie, I'm surprised I have to explain this to you, man.
Just simpleton bread and butter. Yeah.
Well, he says to me, he says, have you ever, he's like, but this is like if you actually lead people away from the church. And I looked at him, I said, I have told people that Joseph Smith Jr. was a hebephile and that I wouldn't want to be a member of this church if I didn't have to be, to endorse the behaviors of a man who did what that man did with those teenage girls who were not, who were entrusted into his care. And he goes, oh, wow, really? Did they leave the church? I'm like, some of them, yeah. And he's like, yeah, apostasy. That's it. We're good. We're good here.
Phew.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you just missed that bullet by a hair, didn't you?
I know. I almost got stuck being a Mormon.
Trying to get excommunicated, and the frickin' church won't ex you.
Yeah, so you were like a reverse missionary for the people that you told the stories about Joseph.
What a story.
So, well, now wait a minute though, because that's interesting. You should mention that, because now there are tons of people I know. I've been meeting more and more people who have done like the quitmormon.org, I believe, route. Just like my wife eventually did. She left the church in the same way,
Right.
and she, a bunch of them are having trouble now where the church is kicking them back, saying, no, we won't accept this resignation. They're making it harder and harder. They're like leaning into, no, you
Won't accept
now.
resignation.
I know, right? Or they put like little legalistics into it, like, oh, this letter wasn't notarized or whatever, or there's not a signature on it, or they didn't specifically, or they didn't have the right membership
That
record.
prevents some really mad anti-Mormons from just sending them dozens and dozens of letters without anyone else knowing it, telling them that I resign when in fact they might not be. So I only get rationale there.
It's almost like there's resignation roulette, because I've heard people say, yeah, I sent an email and later that week said that your name is no longer on the records. But
right,
other people have months.
It does appear to be priesthood roulette. I mean, not just like at the local level, but even at the Salt Lake level. I mean, you think about it, because like all those letters are those quitmormon.org letters, they go to the Cobb, man. They go to the church office building. So as far as I know. But I was talking to some people lately. I said, what I ought to do is just start a church of Korihor, and then people can just join it. And then we make the entrance the entrance is a sack.
Church. I started one.
Yeah, that's right.
I've got an idea for you. Hang on.
All right.
You could call it Community of Korihor.
Community.
What you need to do is do what I do and get your seer stone.
Okay.
That seer stone actually looks like it would have a lot more scriptures in it than Joseph's.
Oh yeah,
this
thing's so big it's pregnant with knowledge.
That would take down Goliath, I think.
Yeah, that if I curl that enough, that'll build my bicep.
That's like the dual purpose Swiss Army seer stones. It could kill a giant and receive revelation.
Yes, weapon
and open up a can.
A sacred weapon or a sacred instrument. Yeah.
Yeah, he's exercising his priesthood. But yeah, so on his way out the door, the mission president, stake president, turns to me and he says, "Hey, I have a question for you." I was like, "Okay," and he's like, "Are you addicted to pornography?" And he was a little too excited about it. And I'm like,
"Hey, he wanted you to recommend a site.
I won't I'll excommunicate you if you let me borrow some of your porn."
You got to do the good stuff. It's like, do you not have internet, President Mitchell? So yeah, no, but he said, I'm like, no. And he's like, no. And he was like really surprised. I'm like, man, we have come a long way from to young men only pamphlets and little factory talks. And I'm like, no, President Mitchell, that's not a thing. That's not real. And he's like,
because his next question could have been, are you a convicted pornographer? And you could say, well, not convicted.
Yeah, but I'm working on
it. Man, I tell you, if there was any money in it anymore these days. But no, he says to me, I'm like, I said, you kick out people for looking at porn? And he goes, oh yeah, it's adultery. And I was like, really?
There's your key.
All of that. And I'm like, you think that there aren't members of your congregation looking at porn right now? And he's like, no, not in this church. And I was like, okay. I see who I'm dealing with.
Wow.
I'm like, okay.
That's right. Have you seen the statistics where all the porn websites say that Utah is their best customer?
Yeah, definitely one I actually talked to. So there's a Mormon themed website, and when I was making my documentary about Mormons and sex that never got finished, so don't go looking for it, I talked to the guy who ran this Mormon themed porn site, and he told me, and he said, well, he runs a handful of them, and he said to me, he said that you would be shocked if I told you how many people in Utah are looking at this. He's like, I expected there to be some, but he was a gay missionary who had fallen on his mission with a companion and everything. And I talked to him about the story. He was the second guy I had interviewed for that documentary who told me that he actually had a terrific experience coming out to a missionary companion who told him, I'm gay too. And then they slept together. And this
sex.
Yeah, the celestial. Yeah, and he seems like he was living his best life. But he told me, he's like, yeah, in Utah, he said, definitely, he said, I'll tell you this, the zip code where we have the most subscriptions is the zip code for Provo. I believe it's what he said.
Provo, of course, BYU.
Yeah. Students.
Right. So anyways, but so I went in. We had the
went in, I bought a Playboy. I showed it to him so that you could get etched, right? You told him, hang on, there's just a store right down the street. I'll go buy me a porn magazine real quick.
That's right.
With me, and we can repent together.
and just in case that didn't do it for you, brother, and I brought this Hustler, and I took Joseph Smith's face and pasted it there.
Slice it in.
Oh boy.
And so I read my whole takedown of why it is that I have told people to leave the church, and those men in that high council room, man, this was not their favorite day. I mean, I couldn't get people to look me in the eye after that in that room. And but I had a lot of respect for them, and a few of them even said something afterwards. They had a chance to say something, and they said, yeah, I've known about that for a while. We're just trying to believe, though. And it'd be like just little comments like that. And I was like, okay, fair enough. I'm like, I'm not. So out.
Yeah, and then they who comments sometimes on my Facebook wall when I post, news or science that's not, we'll say, church friendly. And he'll say something like, what are people going to do if they're not Christians? What better church could they belong to than the Mormon church? And I was like, well, you should do some shopping, first of all. And second of all, there are billions of people that don't believe in Christ that are nice to their neighbors. They follow all the traffic rules. They, pay their taxes.
Nobody follows all the traffic rules. You're lying. I need you to
I just mean in general, they're good citizens, right? Yeah. I was in Thailand. Thailand to me was like a whole bunch of Asian looking Mormons. They were even mostly, for being 100 degrees outside, very modestly dressed, right? It was almost like it was just an Asian ward with, 15 million people in Bangkok. And everybody was being nice on the streets. They were courteous to everybody. It was as if they had believed in Christ their whole lives, and yet they were Buddhists.
Well, maybe the church with its vast fund of wealth ought to go buy Thailand and then just tell them all, hey, you're Mormons, and that's the way they increase their membership.
Well, yes, Thailand's one redeeming characteristic is they have a temple, a Mormon temple. So there you go.
Oh, well, there you go. They've already got their foot in the door. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you, since I've been an atheist, I can tell you the Buddha Gupta, the teachings of the noble truth, the noble truths of Buddhism.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm like, man, I've often said I think Jesus was trying to get, if there was a Jesus, whoever Jesus is, because there are teachings there. I don't buy for a second they are the words of Jesus of Nazareth. That's my opinion. But there are words that were put in these gospels, and I'm like, whoever this is, he's trying to get at what Buddha was getting at. In my opinion, right? The Dhaka, that all that is born suffers.
I remember even hearing somebody like, Jesus, we hear of Jesus being like 13 years old and preaching in the synagogue, and then wham, he's 30 years old and he's on his mission, right? What did he do those intervening years? He went to India and learned from the Magi, right? The people from the East who traveled far, left their card with their address.
Jesus was 12, by the way.
Their gifts. Yeah, he was in his 13th year, I'm Mormon.
I'm good.
And so,
But
so he just went, and that's where he learned all the good teachings.
It's interesting you would say that, right? Because when Jesus would have been, when Jesus would have been a young man. I'm a mythicist. It's not to say that I think for sure that there was no Jesus, but at least there is a logical premise to say there's a good plausibility that this started with a myth and not with a man. And one of the most interesting people in that story that I think it's a shame we don't hear more about is a man named Philo of Alexandria. Yeah. And right. In Alexandria, what did they have in Alexandria, Backyard Professor? That drew a larger,
including the library.
The library. I mean, there's a great meme out there on the internet that says, you're a reader when you still sometimes shed a little tear thinking about the Library of Alexandria burning down. Right?
I do, man. Oh man, yeah.
But I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong on this, Backyard Professor. People from all over the world came to Egypt, northern Egypt, to share teachings and philosophy. They had writings about Buddhism. They had writings from Hinduism, right? Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah.
And at the time, who's there studying? Philo of Alexandria, teaching. Philo of Alexandria. They're great.
All of the great Greeks went to Egypt to learn also. All of them. Plato,
right.
Socrates, Anaximander. Who's the guy that did the democracy? Thales. All of them. All of them went to Egypt. It's amazing that the scholarship at one point denied all that because it threatened the prestige of Greece. Because the Egyptians who were there, they're just a bunch of mud muckers that grew grain in the Nile River. They didn't know anything. And they had it all exactly backwards. Now we do recognize the astonishing legacy of the Egyptian intellect around the whole world. But the fascinating thing now that I'm discovering is the influence might not be going from Egypt and Greece to the Hebrews. The Hebrews' first temple, according to Margaret Barker and some of her ideas, could have been the influence for the Greek philosophy and the Egyptian religion. Interesting. So
that would be curious.
Throw that out there. I'm telling you.
And there's good thinking here. I mean, look, in Alexandria, there was a thriving Jewish community. There was, even today.
Yeah.
Right. And Philo was part of that.
Philo, that was Elephantine. That was an Elephantine. And that was, yeah.
But Philo of Alexandria goes on to write about Melchizedek and writes about it's Philo of Alexandria who first really applies this idea of the Logos as if it could be the Messiah or something,
Absolutely.
And so it's like you have John is way down to the Gospel of St. John. This is quite plausibly not even a first century document from what I understand. Maybe.
Depends who you study, yeah.
Right. And so, but when it starts out like it does in the Hebrew Bible in the beginning, and it's like
Ein Hologos.
That's right. And so it's like by the time that John comes around with this, it's been about 100 years since Philo wrote this very same concept down that God can't exist in his own creation. He can't create himself, but his word, the Logos, the literally the utterance of God can exist inside the universe. And in fact, it's the only way anything in the universe exists. Nothing without God was not anything that was made, right? And it was not anything made that not made that was made. Yeah. Anyways, but that was the whole idea of the Logos. So if Jesus had been taken into Egypt as a child by Joseph and Mary to protect him from Herod, which gets a little hairy. Which Herod are we talking about? Because Herod the Great is dead by that point. So so he's got two sons. He's got more than two sons. Herod. It's kind of this is my brother Daryl. This is my other brother Daryl situation. It's like everybody's Herod in the Herodian dynasty.
They were all Herods.
Right. So this comes to this question is like, which Herod are we talking about? Because the numbering system of our years is predicated on that Jesus was born before Herod died,
Right.
and Herod the Great. And so it's like, and then we start numbering all these years, and then people figured out by the stars, or by an eclipse, and by certain other events that happened in the Roman Empire, that we got this. We're off by 4 years on this.
Yeah, 4 years BC. Some say 7 years AD. Yeah.
You're saying
Right.
the dead guy can't order Jesus to be killed?
Right. I mean, unless Herod is not Herod the Great, is it Antipas or Herod? There are two Herods at that time.
You and Carrie could do a show about that someday. But
we need to.
Was your excommunication then a germ for creating your Korihor book?
Yeah.
Oh,
so at that time, I had been working. I told you about how when I was a missionary, I came up with this idea that I could write a whole paper just on Korihor and why Korihor wins, and why. And the thing that I discovered in this, why it was a doubt for me, is because, if this was Joseph Smith's invention, and I'm not entirely convinced that it is, but if it is Joseph Smith's invention and Korihor wins the debate with Alma, that means that Korihor is Joseph Smith's invention, is Joseph Smith arguing with Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith's atheist side is winning this argument. And that to me was interesting, because it's like, wow, Joseph Smith really wants to believe in God and is struggling with it. And I can respect that, because I've been in this existential journey,
So I can see Joe Rawlins, that Joseph could have known an atheist that was in his area, and he would have used those arguments, and then somehow, in a way, the rest of the Book of Mormon refutes the atheist arguments.
He could have
heard the Lord's hand.
Also, yeah.
Here's the Lord's hand.
Know an atheist to know the argument.
But my understanding is only 5% of the United States went to church back then. That there was not. That's why there were burned over districts. That's why they were on crusades. They were trying to whip up enthusiasm for going to church.
Right. And that's what I would say is that, Joseph Smith was an active part of the burned over district from everything I've read. And I'm sure, I'm in the presence of somebody who can speak. Yeah, exactly. He would get up and he would speak, and he would hear many, many preachers delivering these dissertations. So that's why I don't buy into these people who say, you saw, of course, the Trent Horn debate with A Thoughtful Faith, Jacob Hansen, and they have this arguing from silence, debate between them about basically, you show me, where I said, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, is that that was the moment that Trent Horn should have turned to Jacob Hansen and said, look, you show me your photograph of Joseph Smith's bookshelf and I'll show you mine, right? You can't say, nobody is arguing beyond a reasonable doubt here. Everybody's arguing by a preponderance of the evidence. If there are books that contain this information available in Joseph Smith's time, you have to consider that one piece of evidence that for how Joseph Smith got those names or those, chiastic structures or whatever from here into the Book of Mormon. Your evidence is the Book of Mormon. I mean, you don't have to draw a line directly to it to say this is the proof that it could have happened, and say the only other explanation is that the Book of Mormon is a sacred document, blah, 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 translated by the gift and power of God.
Or there's a B source, the bookshelf in the library,
right?
B source.
Yeah.
Or it's Solomon Spalding. Let's just go back to Solomon Spalding and just forget it all. It's all Sidney Rigdon.
I'm running out of time, so let's do that for another podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's get to where Joe decides to write his book.
Yeah.
So I took that and I drew.
How long did it take you to write it?
About, I think I decided officially it took me 4 years.
Okay, so in a nutshell, what's your argument about the Korihor argument?
My nutshell of the argument is that Joseph Smith or whoever wrote the story of the debate between Alma and Korihor mistook the premise of the debate, which is that in order to believe in God, and Korihor says this in the Book of Mormon, in Alma 30, that he says, I did not say there was no God. There he goes. I did not say there was no God, but I do not believe that there is a God. And except thou show unto me a sign, I will not believe. And yea, show unto me that he hath power. And he says this multiple times. Now, he's described by the narrator as teaching them that there was no God and there would be no Christ. But then he defies that. So then I took that and I laid it out in a flow chart, because I was a debate kid, a Lincoln Douglas debate kid. And, I broke it down in this chart that I have about the constructives, the affirmative and the negative constructives, broke out the consistency of Korihor's argument through all of these stages of the debates, with Ammon, who answers him nothing, Gidona, who just whines and then extradites him illegally, by the way, we're told in Alma 30, to Zarahemla to face Alma, who cannot answer any of his points except for the point about that they glut themselves on the fruits of the labors of the people. So and so I'm like, okay, Alma gets 1 point, he keeps that. But then everything else about Korihor's argument gets through to the end, when Alma, in sorrow for his hard-heartedness, gives him evidence of the power of God. He gives up the argument. He loses. He concedes the debate when he strikes him deaf, when he strikes him mute, presumably with the power of God. I'm like, he loses. I mean, Korihor wins here. And so the first chapter of my book says Korihor wins. And that always bothered me from the time I was a kid.
Is your book available on Amazon?
Yeah, we're going to have a link to it on Amazon in our description.
Good.
And Carrie, if you want to bounce, Joe and I will continue to talk about the book.
I apologize. I'm loving this. It's just so good to meet you, but we'll do another one.
Yeah.
What I'll do, my next paycheck, I'll purchase your book.
Okay. I'll tell you what,
review it. I'll have you on my show and we can argue, because I'm going to take Alma's side and I'm going to win.
Okay, let's try it.
That'd be fun to do, wouldn't it?
That'll be you'd be the only one I would be really legit worried that would probably actually do it.
Well, I've committed myself publicly. I'm willing to go on and debate you as Alma. I mean, my middle name is Alma.
Is it really?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lose this argument, young man.
We'll see. We'll see, sir.
See, right?
We'll do it. Sue versus Sue.
Don't make me smite you, dumb pal.
Well, back here, Professor. I really
so much. Yo, thank you for having me co-host for a few minutes, and it's so good to meet you finally. So
likewise.
We will catch back up.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Easy.
So let's go then about
from there.
About 4 years, you say, but that's only on an hour a night, a couple hours on the weekends.
Sure, it's about a couple hours here and there, but really, because I worked from home. I worked for myself that whole time as a video producer, and so I would just work on it.
An hour here and there. You didn't have a scribe. You didn't have your whole family working a farm for you, so that you can just do whatever you want.
And I didn't have artificial intelligence, which I tell you, I didn't realize how that would be a game changer. But yeah. They didn't have anything like that.
Back in 10 years ago, if somebody had said that my intelligence was artificial, that would have been a slur. But now it's like a badge of honor. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm as smart as a million books because I am AI.
Gene is ChatGPT. He is clever. He is eloquent. He is well-spoken, well-read, and he's wrong 30% of the time.
Gene PT.
Gene PT. Hey, there you go.
There you go.
So I eventually decided that this paper I had written about Korihor was boring, and so I had put in some philosophy stuff to make it interesting, and I'd sent it to a friend of mine who had studied rhetoric and had studied English, had a master's degree in English, And I said, well, I'd like you to read this. And he read it through and he said, it's good. He's like, it's true. He's like, it's a fair set analysis of Korihor and his debate. He said, but
the Venn diagrams follow.
Right. There actually is a Venn diagram in there. It's actually really, and he mentioned to me that was one of his favorite things. But he says to me, he says, but the thing that I love the best is the parts where you talk about yourself and your own experience with this. And he said, I think people are more interested in knowing who you are and what your journey with atheism is. And I said, well, maybe I can add like some stories about my mission in there. And he's like, okay. And that became this book that went from, let's say about this much about Korihor to this much about Korihor and philosophy to
because the 3 pages you have there of Korihor has to be contrasted with like the 3 pages in the Book of Mormon about Korihor.
Right.
So at least you expanded that.
And then Gerald Lund, and I discovered while I was doing research for it that Gerald Lund had written an analysis of Korihor, and it was fantastic in how horrible it was. Because basically, I have it here. Okay, so let me just show this to you.
If you wanted to write a cartoonish comeback to your logical arguments about Korihor, you couldn't have done better than what Gerald Lund did.
Right. About when I was 12 years old, because he wrote that article in 1992. So this is the flow chart that I was telling you about that I wrote about Korihor, and I have it pulled up in your show also. But
Should
just
we
want
pull
to
it
show
up in the show.
Well, let's do it here. Let's do that here in a second.
Okay.
But I'm gonna turn the page so you can see it. So that's my flow chart, right? And then to do Elder Lund a favor, I flow charted his, and this is his flow chart over here. It's about half as much content and really, really bad. And I thought, but that's so fantastic because he actually shows how it is that Mormons keep getting Korihor wrong every time they say, oh, that guy, he's such a Korihor. He's such a Korihor. I'm like, how is anybody supposed to be offended at that? Because Korihor is the smart one in the story who has to be shut up so that he won't, literally so that he can't taint the minds of the people. And so I was like, and so I thought, but Gerald Lund, the way he breaks it down shows very clearly the most Mormon philosophy that there is, which is that he basically presumes that he presumes that everybody does what religious apologists do, which is they stake out a claim of something they can't prove and say, everything I'm going to do, they look for confirmation bias. Everything I am going to adhere to and say happened is I'm going to look only for the things that confirm my bias until I get back to the claim that, out in the dark, which is fine if you accept faith. I understand that. Some people have to have faith so that they can feel good about how things are going, how their life is meaningful and purposeful. And I tell them all the time, I'm not going to try and tell you not to do that because atheism certainly isn't going to make you feel better about your life.
Like if somebody said to you, you're just an Isaac Asimov atheist, you don't know anything, you'd say, why, thank you.
Yeah.
Comparing me with Isaac Asimov, maybe one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time, right?
Yeah. And I don't know that Isaac Asimov was an atheist, was he? I don't think he was. But anyways.
He's in a list of famous atheists that I just looked up.
Oh, I didn't. maybe not. But yeah, no, heck, I'd take that. And he's a great writer too.
And who are the top atheists right now that do debates with Christians and stuff nowadays?
It's a great question because, the best that there was Christopher Hitchens, in my opinion.
Yeah. So if somebody said, oh, you're just another Christopher Hitchens, you don't know anything, you'd say, thank you.
Oh, yeah. And then Alex O'Connor is the new one, man. Young man. I don't know if you follow his stuff, but Alex O'Connor, he's this brilliant young philosopher. And he really, he does amazing work with his debates. I've been very enthusiastic about his work.
I'm only smart enough to every now and then go, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I have a hard time making my own arguments for things.
Well, You should learn from Korihor.
There you go.
So here in the chart that
Bring it
I
on.
sent,
Bring it up.
yeah, you see that all right?
There you go.
Okay, so this is the constructive. This is what I didn't do on Diva's show. So you're getting, this is your exclusive, sir. This is probably the thing that people most love about the book. I've mentioned that before, is that, you know, I break down the Korihor argument, and then I get into, over time, I get into breaking down each of these things he brings up. First of all, you have the affirmative. Korihor argues to the Nephites. Then the negative, Giddonah interrogates Korihor. Affirmative, Korihor defends his position to Giddonah. Then the negative, Alma challenges Korihor, and the affirmative, Korihor reaffirms his position. So it's almost like a Lincoln Douglas debate, basically. And with the constructives kind of blended in with the what do you call it? With the question and answer period, if you will.
Right.
So the first point that Korihor brings up is freedom of religion, okay, or that is brought up, I should say, because in verses 11 through 12, it says there was no law against a man's belief, and the law could have no hold upon him. They go over, they spend a lot of time talking about that right away. And yet, Korihor gets arrested. Then freedom of religion again. Here, Gideon, he did not have much success, for he was taken and bound and carried before the high priest and also the chief judge over the land, verse 21. And then again, towards the end, they caused, in verse 47 or 29 and 47, they caused that he should be bound and brought before Alma. And Alma says, "Thou shalt become dumb, that thou shalt not deceive this people anymore." So the first thing that we see consistently throughout the Korihor argument is that the Nephite culture is supposed to have its own First Amendment. It's supposed to have a protection of people to believe what they want to believe and to not hold them. But then why was Korihor arrested? Why is he struck dumb? Why does he have to die? So
separation of church and state.
That's right. And the church state hegemony in Nephite culture, whatever you want to call it, the United States of Nephi, it's terrible. Then you have clairvoyance. In verse 13, Korihor says, "No man can know of anything which is to come." Then again, Giddonah says, "Why do you speak against all the prophecies of the holy prophets?" So he tries to make an argument in verse 22 about that the prophets can see things that aren't really there, or at least can see the future. Korihor answers, says, "I say that ye do not know that the prophecies are true," verse 24. In verse 40, Alma says, "What evidence have ye?" to Alma. Alma says, "What evidence have ye that there is no God, or that Christ cometh not? None, save it be your word only." And then, of course, Korihor makes his answer and says, "I do not deny the existence of a God, but I do not believe that there is a God. And I say also that ye do not know that there is a God, and except ye show unto me a sign, I will not believe." So there he blends clairvoyance and empiricism. Empiricism again, and so on and so forth. I don't know how much you want me to go into this, but basically every point that Korihor makes, he makes consistently throughout each of these debates, including confirmation bias and tabula rasa, and Alma makes his case for presuppositionalism, and then this plea to authority at the end. So you have all of this consistently. There's no answer being made by Ammon or Giddonah or Alma to the points, with the exception of materialist motive, where Alma says here, "I have never received so much as even one C9, which is like a Nephite dollar, for my labor, neither has any of my brethren, save it were in the judgment seat," verse 33. And that one, Korihor leaves open-ended. There's a point there, as I said before.
Right, but that's still just Alma's testimony. There's no, we just don't have the evidence of the double books.
True, but this was Korihor's chance to say so, and he doesn't say so. So I say, give him something. Throw Alma a bone. Give brother Alma a break. So I'll break it down for you the other way, though, here, if I can, if I haven't bored you yet.
And let's look at the bad.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Bad arguments.
Yeah. So let me pull that up. Share screen.
That who Gerald Lund made? Is that where you're going to go?
Mm-hmm. That's right. I believe this should be it. Okay, you should be able to see that now. So this is the chart that I was showing you that was on the back page of that chart. Okay, so this is from Elder Lund's talk, Countering Korihor's Philosophy. Okay, so you'll see that he breaks it down by Korihor's philosophical foundations and then breaks down Alma's answer to Korihor. In brief, he breaks it down to epistemology, which is the philosophy of how we know anything, right? What does it mean to know something? Then metaphysics, which is a question of what is the stuff that the real universe is made of, or what does it mean to be real versus not real? And then axiology, which is a question of the moral value of something. Okay, and so he breaks Korihor's philosophies down by each of these categories. And he doesn't do a particularly phenomenal job of it. I'll say that much. So basically under the epistemology, he mentions that Korihor's argument is that you can't know what you can't see or experience. Therefore, you can't know the future because you can't see it with your eyes. Therefore, prophecies cannot be true. Therefore, you can't know of Christ or of his atonement. So that's how he breaks down Korihor's philosophy of epistemology. What he totally leaves out there is that Korihor's epistemology starts with that he says basically what Socrates says, which is the first thing that I know is that I don't know, or how much I don't know, I guess you could say. So in other words, he admits that he does not know that there is no God. He just does not. He also admits to not believing in God.
There could be knowledge out there that I don't have. And if you will
Correct.
Provide me with that knowledge, I can accept or reject it. But right now, I'm not going to bother with it.
Correct. And that's that. And that gets completely omitted from Lund's breakdown of his philosophy.
And so that makes Lund say that Korihor's argument is weak.
Correct. Well, I think to summarize it, I would say his estimation is that Korihor's view of the world is narrow, and that all of these points rely on each other to be true. So if any one of them is not true or is dubious, then you can't believe any of them, which doesn't make sense. And is number one. And number two, more importantly, he leaves out the rationalism. He's only making a case that Korihor is making an appeal for empirical evidence, but he's not. He's making an appeal for rationalism, and that's just absent here. That's just not, he doesn't even address it. Under metaphysics, he says that Korihor's philosophy is men fare by their own management, so the management of the creatures, the way that he says it, which is true. Okay. Therefore, success depends on one's strength and genius. That is something he did say. Therefore, there is nothing beyond this life. He does make that contention. And therefore, man is the supreme reality. That is not, that is not the conclusion. Yeah. He's making a case for something that Korihor's not arguing for, at least not in that string.
What would you put as the last therefore instead of
I wouldn't put them like this at all, because basically he's trying to make a logical dependency here that doesn't exist. Each of Korihor's points either stands or falls on its own. And and then if you can take one and say, well, therefore you can't, if this isn't true, then this one isn't true. Then you have to show that individually with each of those.
There's no Venn diagram overlap.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's no. I would say there's no sequence. There's no generational logic here, right?
Right. It'd be like saying lemons are yellow, limes are green. Therefore, if I have an orange, it's not
right.
It's not.
Yeah, it's like
or something else.
It's like lemons are yellow, carrots are orange. But me personally, I like Star Wars. Yeah,
it doesn't follow.
It's absurd, right? Under axiology, he goes into what is good. Now, this is why I've many times compared Gerald Lund to Jacob Hansen and his, because Jacob Hansen, he starts with his, from every time I've heard him talk about it, he starts his collective witness model with this idea that, okay, first we have to talk about how does the philosophy or the epistemology, that is to say, he's talking about how do we know things. He says, let's start with what are the fruits? What are the things that, what are the moral values that come out of the thing? And I say that is basically Gerald Lund's argument is that all of this is built on the axiology, is that if the thing that you believe makes you do good things as the church says, or as you may even intuitively think, then the philosophy is good, right? That's Alma and his.
You're almost saying like if Hitler had taken over the world and had done more good things than bad, then Hitler would have been from God.
Sure. I think, I think that's definitely the kind of direction he was going in. More importantly, I think he was trying to make the case like Jesus, saying, about false prophets, by their fruits you shall know them. But on that point, I think that, Jesus and Jacob Hansen are wrong, in my opinion. It's like, it's not so much, something can be logically consistent and have no basis in morality. And the moral judgments of people are so subjective. There's no way that anybody can be consistent in deciding what are the moral fruits of any philosophy or even any action.
Right. I remember hearing stuff like a mafia boss for their community, they would send flowers to recent widows. They would donate to good causes. They would be really, really, really good fruits for their community. But just some people had to die every now and then for them to keep control.
Right.
So they have really good fruit. So they must have been from God. Right.
Right. It doesn't make sense. You're absolutely, you're hitting it right on the head.
So that's almost like saying, what is it that where you say the ends justify the means?
Sure. Yeah. Machiavellianism. Sure. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
So lying for the Lord fits right in there.
You got it. You got it all. You got it exactly. That's how we get all of this philosophy. And so, so I mean, basically it doesn't make sense. I guess we don't have to bother to break that down, but yeah. So basically his logic on Korihor is wrong. I mean, it just, he leaves out the most important parts. He does. And he leans on this explanation of the value of the philosophy based upon moral presumptions that aren't objective. They're not universal to everyone. Alma's answer to Korihor, he says, Korihor, in the columns here, he says, Korihor, you know that we don't profit from our service in the church, but you say we glut ourselves on the labor of the people. Therefore, you deliberately twist the truth. I say you are possessed of a lying spirit. And so, then he says, you cannot prove that there is no God. You believe only what can be proved. You are not consistent with your own statements. You believe there. So I say, that you believe that there is a God. And he says, you do not believe in him. You are lying to yourself. Therefore, you know that you do not believe in him. You are lying to yourself and to us. There are many signs that prove God lives, and you won't believe unless you see a sign. Okay. Okay, fair enough. Those are the contentions, the arguments that are being made. What he doesn't bring up in here is that at no point does Alma prove any of this. He doesn't bring up any evidence, and most of his teachings, most of his contentions are based on tautologies, which is to say things that just insist upon themselves. They're just trying to, you already know that. Everybody knows that. It's common sense that. And then says things that just aren't common sense. That we glut that we don't profit from our service in the church. Then why would Korihor have said it if he knew that? He's trying to He's trying to do he's trying to do Inception, right? He's trying to put the thought in his head. You already believe this, and he doesn't make any contention for it, right? He could have brought up witnesses. He could have brought up specific instances. There's any kind of thing he could have done here to prove that, and he doesn't even try. And it just goes on and on like this. So the only thing that I could say that he definitely, that he makes a fair enough case is to say, Korihor, that there is that I've never taken even one C9 from these people. And then Korihor makes no answer to him. That was his chance to say, yeah, prove it. You say I know that, but you don't. I don't know that. So I'd love to know how it is that you claim to know that I know that. So I think whatever you may feel about Elder Lund's assessment here, I think everyone can agree, and I'm happy to be told that I'm wrong, that this is not the same kind of class of breakdown of Korihor's argument as the one that I made earlier.
So you're saying Gerald Lund might have preconceived notions or arguing from a point of necessity. What do you call that?
He argues from silence. He definitely does that. More importantly, he appeals
motivated
to
reasoning. He has motivated reasoning.
Sure.
I'm going to try to prove what I believe is true by sort of putting this thing in a way that comforts me.
Mm-hmm. And confirmation bias more than anything else.
Bias.
Right. I'm looking for the things that confirm what I already believe. If it's something else, I don't want to hear about it. Right.
So like at the very bottom of the page, if you zoom into the very bottom, the third line over, it's therefore, what does that say? There are many signs that prove that God lives. Right. And so that's a presumption, right?
Mm-hmm. It doesn't pass all of this. All of his argument doesn't pass Occam's razor. And we talked about this before. Occam's razor doesn't tell you what the truth is, but definitely establishes firmly where the burden of proof lies, right? Which is so important in this conversation if we're going to talk about proving things, right? It's like Occam's razor, just so that we catch everybody up, lowest common denominator here, says that when you have two plausible solutions to the same question, the one that bears the burden of proof is the one that is more complicated, in other words, that requires more presumptions. So, and with all of Alma's arguments, you're always going to start with, well, first of all, there is a God, and that is big. That's a big presumption, right? And sent prophets, and those prophets, and created this universe and created the world. And all these things, and each of those are points that if you stopped and really looked at it and said, well, do we know that? How do we know that? What is the case to be made here? He's just taking that all as read, saying, well, basically from a presuppositional standpoint, saying, look, this guy has been brought up in Nephite culture. He has been a Nephite all his life. He knows these things to be true already. So I'm not going to take any time to stop and prove any of it. But what that really concedes is that he doesn't know any of this by logical reasoning himself, which is fine if all he wants to do is convince himself to believe in God, or even if he wants to convince other people to believe in God. That is fine. But don't call it a logical argument. If it's emotional reasoning, then it's emotional reasoning. There's nothing wrong with that. I really do mean that. But the fact of the matter is, you can't go blow by blow with the logic on it if you're going to make emotional reasoning arguments.
I was trying to think of like a modern sort of example, like manifest destiny, right? It's God's will that the white Europeans that lived in Eastern states are supposed to kill all the natives across through the West and put them in little reservations because God wants us to dominate this land.
That's right. Because they called it America.
But it doesn't mean necessarily, it doesn't follow that God wanted it and that God was protecting the white man. It meant the white man had guns and the Indians had bows and arrows and rocks.
And numbers and money and and
resources.
disease, a lot of communicable disease,
right?
and the low moral fiber to be willing to use all of those, including what is effectively biological weaponry, to eradicate people, for genocide.
Right,
But
and to do what Christopher Hitchens said, I believe, is that some of the most atrocious behaviors in the history of humanity have been in the name of God.
That's right. He called him the most, and he was quoting somebody else when he called him this. He says the most unpleasant character in all of fiction. Hitch was the man. He wasn't always right, but boy, could he argue it. I loved it. In that
now
same
we've given
line
everybody
of thought,
like the teaser of your book, right? If they want to know more of your story, they could go buy your book. They could
or go to Hellfire Agency. I really have to stress this. You'd save a lot of money by just getting a month of Hellfire Agency, which is only $6.66 a month. I felt so badly, I'll tell you this, charging $20-something for this
whatever
book.
The publishers
Right. Yeah, well, it's the only way that it can be profitable, print on demand through Amazon's publishing services. I'm like, gosh, man, I wish I could just make, eventually I may release the audio book through Audible so that people can just listen to it on Audible. But
maybe
right now,
Satan to do the audio.
Well, got a microphone. So while I'm working for the Dark Lord, I'll just do it myself with my own voice, which is what I've been doing. That's right.
Doing the work of Satan.
That's right. Doing the work of my Lord, the Prince of Darkness, the Father of Lies.
That's right. That seems to be disturbingly truthful most of the time.
It's interesting because I got started into, I think I told you about this before last time, that I started on TikTok blowing up because I started talking about Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad, and people started calling me a servant of the devil. And I thought, man, wouldn't that be just so metal? I mean, do you guys know how mundane and boring I am? And that's, in the end, that's how I ended up deciding I was going to start a true crime podcast, because everybody else thought, all the other comments I had from thousands of people were comments about, I really wish you had a podcast because you go deep into these things and you really do some research and bring up
some
points
good information.
Yeah. And so I said, if I had a true crime podcast, I would do it just about scandals of the American religious right. And I would love it. And this group of people, ex-evangelicals and ex-Mormons, they would love it. And let's just lean into the whole servant of the devil thing. We'll call it Hellfire Agency. And so that's why we called it that. Now I go on people's shows.
Filthy lucre.
Not much of it, but
dirty money, clean money. We'll take whatever we can get, right?
That's right. You know that we do this for the passion, for the love of it, because there's no way we're doing it for the money.
I think if Satan was really behind something, that you would be able to amass at least $132 billion.
If you can only serve God or mammon. I will mention that between you and me and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, only one of us has at least $250 billion in assets.
There you go.
And I'll kill you, and it's not me.
That's right. So thanks a lot, Joe, for coming. We'll try to put this out really soon. My hopes was it'd be sooner than it is, but it took a little while to get things going. But thanks a lot. We shall talk more about other things in the future. Everybody, like and subscribe if you made it this far. Again, like we said before. And everybody have a great rest of the year. And if you're going to watch conference tomorrow, bless you. All right. Bye-bye.
Good to see you.